There is a question that sits in a very specific place, not loud enough to dominate every conversation, not quiet enough to fully ignore. It lives somewhere in the middle. In the background of the wedding you attended last weekend, where you smiled genuinely and meant it, and still drove home in a silence that had a particular texture to it. In the birthday, where someone who loves you asked if you were seeing anyone and the answer was still no, and you gave the answer with more composure than you actually felt. In the moment you catch yourself doing the math again, how old you are, how long it has been, how many more years of this particular kind of waiting you are willing to hold. The question is not always articulate. Sometimes it does not have words at all. Sometimes it is just a feeling. The feeling of a space in your life that has been designated for something and is still empty. The feeling of showing up to a life that is genuinely good in many real ways and still being aware of the thing that is missing from it. The feeling of not wanting to be the kind of person who defines themselves by their relationship status, and also being honest that the relationship status matters to you in a way that does not go away just because you decide it should not. And underneath all of that, asked privately, asked in the dark, asked in the honest interior of a life that has been brought to the things of God with sincerity, is the actual question. Why is it still me? Not bitterly, necessarily, not always, but honestly. Why am I still here? What is happening? What am I not doing, or not seeing, or not releasing, or not becoming that is keeping this from arriving? Is it something about me? Is it timing? Is it a test? Is it a direction I'm supposed to interpret as a sign? Is it just the ordinary randomness of a world where things do not always arrive in the order or the timing that would make the most sense? If you have asked that question, if you are asking it right now in the particular form it takes for the particular version of you that is living through this particular season, then I want you to stay with me. Because I want to spend time in this today in a way that is honest and unhurried and takes the question seriously, rather than offering you the set of answers that sound right from the outside and land hollow from the inside. Let me start with something that is almost never said in conversations about singleness in faith spaces, and that I think needs to be said before anything else can be honest. The desire for a partner is not a spiritual problem. It is not evidence of insufficient contentment. It is not a sign that you are placing too much weight on something that should not matter as much as it does to you. It is not the thing that needs to be healed or surrendered or diminished before the rest of your life can be fully lived. The desire for partnership, for love, for the specific kind of knowing and being known that comes from a committed, intimate relationship is one of the most fundamental and most thoroughly human desires available. And yet, in so many faith communities and so many well-meaning conversations, the message that gets delivered to single people is something that sounds like support and functions more like correction. You just need to be content where you are. You need to be whole in yourself first. You need to stop wanting it so much. Stop looking. Stop thinking about it. Trust God and let it go, and then it will come. Almost as if the desire itself is the obstacle. Almost as if wanting it too much is the reason it has not arrived. I want to challenge that framework gently but directly, because it contains a kind of cruelty that is not always intended but is very real in its impact. It asks you to pretend to feel something you do not feel in order to qualify for the thing you actually do feel. It makes the desire itself something to be ashamed of rather than something to be honest about, and it puts you in the impossible position of trying to want less in order to eventually get more. The desire is not the problem. The desire is not what is in the way. The desire is a real and legitimate part of who you are, and it deserves to be held with honesty and dignity rather than managed away in the name of spiritual maturity. I want to name some of the specific forms that the wondering why takes, because the still single experience is not one thing. It is a collection of very different experiences that can all produce the same question from very different places. For some people, the wondering why comes from a history of almost. The relationships that were close to the real thing, but ultimately were not. The person who seemed like the one until they were clearly not. The relationship that went far enough and long enough that the ending produced a grief that still has not fully resolved. The pattern of getting to a certain point and then something shifts and you find yourself alone again, wondering what the pattern is telling you about yourself or about what you are doing, or about whether love in the form you imagine it is actually available to you. For some people, the wondering why comes from the absence of almost, the years that have passed without a significant relationship at all, without even the proximity of it, the feeling of not just waiting for the right one, but wondering why there has been no real candidate. And the specific loneliness of that experience, which is different from the loneliness of the post-relationship season, because it includes the additional layer of not being chosen at all, which the mind, left to its own interpretation, tends to make personal in the most damaging possible way. For some people, the wondering why is entangled with a specific timeline that has expired, the age by which you thought this would be resolved, the milestone that has come and gone without the thing it was supposed to contain. And the grief of that is not just about the missing relationship, it is about the loss of the version of the future you were building in your imagination, the children at a certain age, the partnership for a certain chapter, the version of yourself in the context of a family that was supposed to exist by now. That grief is real, and it deserves to be named as grief rather than impatience. And for some people, the wondering why comes from a specific place of faith confusion, the feeling of having prayed about this, of having trusted, of having done what was supposed to be done spiritually to position yourself for this, and the absence of the thing stretched over years of sincere faith, producing a specific kind of doubt that is less about the existence of God and more about whether God is particularly interested in or attentive to this specific part of your life. Whether love is something that the faith you practice actually has anything to say about in a form that is practically real rather than theologically abstract. Wherever the wondering why is coming from for you, it is real, and it is not small, and it does not need to be made smaller in order for you to be considered spiritually mature. Before we go any further, I want to stop and ask you something honest. What story are you telling yourself about why you are still single? Because almost everyone who has been single for longer than they expected has a story. Usually it is not just one story, it is a layered set of them. And some of those stories are probably accurate, and some of them are distortions produced by a mind that needs to make meaning of something it does not understand. The stories tend to fall into a few categories. There is the story about what is wrong with you, too much of something or not enough of something else, too independent or too needy, too focused on the wrong things or not focused enough on the right ones, too guarded or too available, too much yourself or not enough yourself in the specific ways that attract the kind of person you are looking for. There is the story about what you did or did not do, the relationship you stayed in too long, the person you let go too easily, the moment you should have said something and did not, or said something and should not have, the choices that took you in a direction that reduced the probability of this happening in the way it was supposed to happen. There is the story about your specific circumstance, where you live, what you do for work, the community you are part of, and the limited pool of people it contains, the season of life you are in, and the demands it places on your time and energy, the way your life is currently arranged, and whether that arrangement is compatible with what finding and building a relationship actually requires. And there is the story about God and what God is doing or not doing with this, the meaning of the waiting, whether it is developmental, whether God is forming you for someone, whether it is protective, whether God is keeping you from something that would hurt you, whether it is purposeful in some direction you cannot yet see, whether it is simply the ordinary working of a world in which things do not always align with what you need in the timing you need them. I am not going to tell you which of those stories is true for you. I do not know, and I would be skeptical of anyone who claimed to know from the outside. But I want to ask you to hold all of those stories a little more loosely than you might currently be holding them. Because the stories you are telling yourself about why this has not happened are shaping how you show up in your own life. They are shaping your openness, your capacity to be present, your willingness to take risks. And if the story is not accurate, the shape it is giving your life is not serving you. Let me talk about the waiting, because the waiting is where most of the interior work of this season actually happens, and it deserves more than the instruction to just trust God and be patient. Waiting for something that matters is not passive. We have already talked about this in other conversations, but it is worth saying again here because it is so consistently misunderstood in the context of relationship. Waiting is not the absence of living. It is not the holding pattern you circle in until real life begins. And if you have structured your interior life around the sense that your real life begins when the relationship arrives, that structural error is one of the most significant things available to address in this season. Not because it will make the relationship arrive faster, but because it is costing you the only life you actually have, which is the one happening right now. The life you are living in the waiting is not the lesser version. It is not the practice run. It is the actual thing. It contains actual experiences and actual growth and actual relationships and actual contributions and actual moments of beauty and meaning and depth that are not diminished by the absence of the romantic partnership. And the degree to which you are able to receive that, to be genuinely present in the life you actually have rather than perpetually oriented toward the life you are waiting for, is one of the most significant determinants of whether the waiting destroys you or develops you. That is not a comfortable thing to say to someone who genuinely wants partnership and does not have it. I know it can sound like the very framing that was challenged at the beginning, like another version of you just need to be content where you are. But I want to be specific about the difference. I am not saying the desire should go away. I'm not saying the wanting is the problem. I'm saying that a life that has been structurally organized around what is absent rather than what is present is a life that is missing a quality of engagement with itself that it deserves. And that quality of engagement is not in tension with the desire for partnership. It is part of the same healing. I want to talk about the loneliness, because there are different kinds of loneliness, and the kind that comes with an extended single season has its own specific texture. There is the obvious loneliness, the absence of the specific kind of companionship that comes from a committed relationship, the not having someone who is specifically your person, who knows your daily life in its ordinary details, who you come home to or who comes home to you. The absence of that specific form of being known and being accompanied is real, and it is significant, and it does not disappear just because you are surrounded by good people who love you. But there is also a less obvious loneliness that comes with this particular season. The loneliness of not being able to talk about what it is actually like without people trying to fix it. The friend who immediately offers reassurance that it will happen. The family member who immediately offers suggestions. The well-meaning person who has been in a relationship for so long they cannot remember what this actually feels like from the inside and whose attempt at empathy lands as advice rather than presence. And so you learn to manage what you share about this, to give people the version they can handle, which means the actual experience goes largely unspoken, and unspoken things are lonelier than spoken ones. There is also the loneliness of celebrations, weddings especially, but also anniversaries and Valentine's Days and couple-centered gatherings and the ordinary ways that culture organizes social life around the assumption that adults come in pairs. These spaces can be navigated. People do it all the time with grace, but it is still costing something to navigate them. And the cost is not always acknowledged or even perceived by the people around you who are not navigating the same thing. And there is the loneliness of the specific hours. Not all hours are equally hard. The evenings are harder than the mornings for most people. Sunday afternoons, the holidays, the moments when something good happens and you reach for your phone and there is no specific person to tell it to in the way that a partner would receive it. The small moments of wanting to share something with someone who is specifically yours and not having that person. Those moments are small and they are accumulating. And they deserve to be acknowledged as real rather than minimized as ingratitude. I want to speak now to the specific pain of watching people who seem less ready than you arrive at the thing you have been waiting for, because this is one of the most honest and least discussed parts of the still single experience. The person in your life who has not done the work you have done, who has not been intentional in the ways you have been intentional, who has not, by any external measure, arrived at a place of greater readiness for a healthy relationship than you have, and yet they are in one. A good one, a lasting one, and you are not. And the question that arrives with that observation is one of the more painful ones available. What does this mean? Is readiness not actually the variable? Is intentionality not actually relevant? Is the thing I have been trying to develop and the work I have been trying to do not actually what determines when this arrives? I want to be honest with you about this, because the answer is uncomfortable and important and often not given with sufficient directness. Readiness is not the only variable. The world does not operate with the precision that would be required for the most ready person to always receive the thing first. Relationships form for reasons that include chemistry and timing and proximity and 1,000 other factors that are not fully in your control, no matter how developed or healed or intentional you are. And watching someone else's relationship form does not tell you something definitive about the state of your readiness or the quality of your faith or the degree to which you are or are not doing the right things. What it does do is reveal something about what you are believing. And if watching someone else receive the thing you are waiting for produces a specific kind of destabilization in you, if it makes the ground shift under your own hope, that is worth paying attention to. Not as evidence that something is wrong with you, but as information about where your hope is actually located, whether it is located in something steady, or whether it is located in the comparison, in the ranking, in the belief that there is a fairness to this that your life should be participating in and appears not to be. Let me talk about what trusting God with your love life actually looks like, not the version that sounds like the right answer, the version that is actually operative. Because trust, in this context, is one of the most misused words available. It gets used as an instruction. Just trust God with it. As if trust is a decision you make once and then the anxiety resolves and the peace settles in, and the wondering why quiets down and you go about your life in a state of settled confidence that everything is unfolding correctly. That is not trust. That is the performance of trust. And the performance is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable and produces a specific kind of spiritual fatigue in people who are trying very hard to feel something they do not actually feel. Real trust is not the absence of the questions. Real trust is not the absence of the ache. Real trust is not the successful suppression of the wondering why until it finally stops asking. Real trust looks much more like, I do not understand this, and I still believe something is holding me. I am in pain about this, and I have not stopped bringing it to the conversation. I cannot see how this resolves, and I have chosen to keep moving in my life rather than waiting at the door of the unanswered question until it opens. Real trust is not certainty about the outcome. It is the willingness to keep living faithfully in the absence of certainty, to keep investing in yourself and in your relationships and in your calling and in the life you are actually living, rather than suspending all of that investment until the thing you are waiting for arrives to make the investment feel worthwhile. That is a different and harder and more honest version of trust than the one that gets preached, and it is the only kind that actually holds up against the reality of an extended season of waiting. I want to pause here and ask you to do something specific. Think about one area of your life, just one, that you have been withholding from yourself because you are waiting for the relationship first. Maybe it is a trip you have been putting off because you want to take it with someone. Maybe it is a home you have been reluctant to make fully yours because it still feels temporary. Maybe it is a community you have not fully invested in because you are not sure this is where you will be long term. Maybe it is a version of yourself, a goal, a creative pursuit, a way of spending your time that you have been keeping in reserve because it feels like something you should be doing in a different chapter. I want to invite you to reclaim that one thing. Not all of it, just one thing. One specific thing that you have been saving for the life you are waiting for rather than giving to the life you actually have. Because the life you actually have deserves your full presence and your full investment, not the leftover version, not the provisional version that is being held back pending the arrival of the partnership, the full version. And reclaiming one thing from the reserved category and giving it to the present is one of the most concrete ways of actually practicing the trust that cannot be performed but can be lived. What is that one thing for you? Sit with that question, and then take one step towards it this week, just one. That is the beginning. Let me talk about the practical dimension of this. Because trust is not the only thing that is operative in whether a relationship forms. There are practical realities that deserve honest attention alongside the spiritual ones. Community matters, and I mean the actual, physical, in-person kind, the places where you are known over time, where you are seen in your ordinary life rather than in your curated presentation, where the kind of gradual, accumulating familiarity that is the actual foundation of most lasting relationships can develop. And if the communities you are part of do not contain people who are potential partners for you, that is not a spiritual problem. It is a practical one, and it has practical responses. This does not mean you are supposed to be strategic and calculating about every community you enter, attending only the ones with the highest partner density. That is not the point. The point is that relationships do not typically form in isolation. They form in the overlap of real lives. And the more you are genuinely present in communities that align with who you are and what you value, the more naturally the conditions for that overlap exist. Openness matters too. Not the performed openness that says I am open to meeting someone while the actual interior is still fairly well guarded against the vulnerability that meeting someone requires. Actual openness. The willingness to be in conversation with people you do not already know. The willingness to be curious about people who do not immediately fit the specific picture you have been carrying. The willingness to let someone see enough of the real you early enough that something genuine has a chance to form rather than only the presented version getting to be known. And honesty about what you are looking for matters, not in a demanding or rigid way, but in a clear way. The clarity about your own values, your own needs, your own non-negotiables, the kind of partnership you are actually looking for versus the kind that is theoretically acceptable, is not something that narrows your options in a damaging way. It is what allows you to recognize something real when it appears, rather than mistaking proximity for compatibility. I want to speak to the people who have been told that being single is a gift, because this framing has done real damage to real people, and it deserves to be addressed directly. There is a version of this that is true. Singleness as a season contains genuine freedoms and genuine opportunities that partnered life does not. There are things available to you right now in the particular structure of your life that would not be available in the same form if you were building a shared life with someone. There is a kind of self-knowledge that develops in the single season that has real value. There is a capacity for independence and intentionality that gets built. These things are real. But the framing of singleness as a gift has also been used, sometimes consciously and sometimes not, to spiritually pressure people into pretending they are at peace with something that is genuinely causing them pain. To make the expression of desire feel like ingratitude for the gift. To suggest that the person who is honest about their longing has somehow failed to appreciate what they have been given. And that pressure produces something that does not serve anyone. It produces the performance of contentment over the honesty of longing. And performance in the interior life always costs more than it produces. You can appreciate what this season genuinely offers and still want it to be a different season. Both of those things are true, and both of them deserve space. The gift framing does not have to be the whole story. The whole story includes the loss. The whole story includes the desire. The whole story includes the genuine difficulty of carrying something that a significant portion of your culture and your community is not structured to fully accommodate or understand. You are allowed to hold all of it, the gift and the grief, the genuine good of the season and the genuine ache of the thing that is not yet here. Both, at the same time, without one cancelling the other. Let me speak to the question of standards, because it is almost always raised in conversations about extended singleness, and it is almost always raised in a way that puts the blame for the waiting on the person who is waiting. You are too picky, your standards are too high, you need to be more flexible. You are looking for someone who does not exist. You have an unrealistic picture of what a relationship is supposed to look like, and real people cannot compete with it. I want to address this carefully because it contains both something that is sometimes true and something that is very often used as a weapon. The something that is sometimes true is this. If the specific picture of the person you are looking for is so detailed and so specific that no actual human being could fully inhabit it without being the projection rather than a person, that is worth examining. Not because your standards are too high, but because the picture might be more about avoiding the vulnerability of an actual relationship than about genuinely knowing what you need. The overly specific ideal can function as a protection against the risk of real intimacy, and that is worth being honest about. But the weapon version of the standards conversation is this: the suggestion that the reason you are still single is that you have failed to lower your expectations to a level that would make you more partnerable, that the person you are looking for would be available to you if you would just want them to be less, that your loneliness is a consequence of your requirements, and that the solution is to require less. I want to say clearly that settling is not the alternative to waiting. Entering a relationship that is not actually right because the waiting has become intolerable is not trust in action. It is fear in action. And fear-based decisions in the context of choosing a life partner tend to produce exactly the kind of outcome that makes you wish you had waited. The question worth asking is not, are my standards too high? It is, are my standards actually aligned with what I genuinely need? And am I being honest about the difference between a need and a preference? And am I open to the reality that the person who is right for me may arrive in a form that does not match the picture I have been holding? That is a different and more nuanced question. And it deserves a different and more nuanced engagement than the standards are too high conversation usually provides. I want to address the fear that this is permanent. Because for people who have been in this season for a significant amount of time, the fear is not just about the present, it is about the trajectory. The wondering whether this is not a season, but a state, whether the wait is actually a wait, or whether the thing that is being waited for is not coming. And that fear, if it is present in you, deserves to be named and engaged with, rather than suppressed under reassurance that has not proven to be reliably accurate. I am not going to promise you that the relationship is coming. I do not have access to that information. I would be doing you a disservice if I performed a certainty I do not have in order to make this conversation feel more comfortable. What I can say is this: the fear that the thing is not coming is not evidence that the thing is not coming. It is evidence that you have been in the waiting long enough that the waiting has started to feel like a verdict rather than a season. And those two things are not the same. The length of the wait is not a reliable predictor of the outcome. It is an uncomfortable fact of the current moment. And uncomfortable facts of the current moment are not the same as permanent realities. What I can also say is this: a life without a romantic partner is not an incomplete life. It is a different shape of life. And the degree to which that statement lands as consolation or as truth depends entirely on what you have built into the life you are currently living. The people who are most devastated by the idea of permanent singleness are almost always people who have not invested fully in the life they are actually in. And the people who have invested fully, who have built genuine community and genuine purpose and genuine depth into the current version of their life, experience the prospect of permanent singleness differently, not without grief, but without the specific devastation that comes from a life that has been held in reserve. This is not a call to give up on the desire. It is a call to stop withholding your full self from the life you are in while you wait for the relationship to make that full investment feel warranted. Let me talk about healing, because some of what is happening in the extended single season, underneath the waiting and the wondering why, is healing that needs to happen, regardless of whether the relationship arrives. There are patterns that most of us carry into relationships that were not developed in relationships. They were developed earlier, in the family we grew up in the early experiences that shaped how we understand love and safety and closeness and conflict. And those patterns, unexamined, go with us into every relationship we attempt. They are part of why some relationships do not survive. They are part of why the same dynamics keep appearing in different forms with different people. And the single season, engaged with honestly rather than simply endured, is one of the most available opportunities for that examination to happen. Not because suffering alone produces healing. It does not. But because without the immediate demands of a relationship, there is a kind of access to your own interior that is harder to maintain inside a partnership. The patterns are more visible when they are not being triggered and defended against simultaneously. The questions about what you are bringing into relationship are more available when you are not in the middle of one. This is not the same as saying the singleness is for your healing, and once you are healed enough, you will receive the relationship. That is the framework that was challenged at the beginning. It is something different. It is recognizing that the season you are in contains real opportunities for real development that have real value regardless of what comes after. And taking those opportunities is not a strategy for attracting a partner. It is faithfulness to the life you are actually in. What are you learning about yourself in this season that you have not known before? What patterns are you seeing with the clarity that distance provides? What is being developed in you, slowly and non-linearly, that the person you are becoming is going to carry forward regardless of the form the next chapter takes? Those questions are worth sitting with, not as spiritual exercises that will accelerate the arrival of the relationship, as genuine investments in the only version of you that is available to be in relationship with anyone, the actual you, the developing you, the you that is being formed right now in the middle of the wondering why. I want to close with something that I have been building toward throughout this entire conversation. The trusting God with your love life part of this title is not primarily about releasing control over when the relationship arrives. That is part of it. But the deeper version of it is something more fundamental. It is about trusting that the life you are living right now, in this particular form, with this particular shape, with the partnership not yet present, is not a mistake, is not a detour from your real life, is not the lesser version that you are enduring until the real thing begins, is not evidence of anything being withheld from you as a consequence of something you did or are, is not an accident. It is a life. Your actual life. The one that is happening while you are waiting for the one you planned. And it contains things that matter. It contains you, which matters. It contains the relationships you have built and the work you're doing and the person you are becoming and the ways you are showing up in the world that are real and significant and not contingent on a partner being present for them to count. Trusting God with your love life, at the deepest level, is trusting that you are seen and known and accompanied in this specific life. Not in the imagined future version. This one. With the empty space still in it, with the question still unanswered, with the wondering why still not fully resolved. This version is not outside the territory of that care, it is inside it. And the relationship, if and when it comes, will not arrive to complete a person who was incomplete. It will arrive into the life of someone who was already whole in the particular, imperfect, still developing, genuinely alive way that wholeness actually looks for human beings who are in process. That is who you are, right now. Not the incomplete version waiting to be finished, the actual version. In process, in the middle of something real, accompanied in it even when the accompaniment is not always easy to feel. Here is what I want to ask of you as we close today. 3 things, small and honest and specific. The first thing, write down one thing that you have been withholding from your current life because you have been waiting for the relationship to arrive first. One specific thing. And make a decision today to take one step toward reclaiming it for the life you are actually in. Not all of it, just one step. The second thing, find one person this week who you can tell the honest version of where you are with this. Not the composed version, not the spiritually resolved version, the real one. The version that includes the wondering why and the loneliness and the grief of the expiring timelines. One person who can hold that without needing to immediately fix it or resolve it or redirect you toward hope. Just one person. Let one person know where you actually are. The third thing, ask yourself honestly what this season is developing in you that you would not have access to in a different form of life. Not to justify the waiting, not to make the ache seem smaller, but to acknowledge that something real is happening in you right now, something that matters. Something that is part of the story even though it does not feel like the chapter you were supposed to be in. Those 3 things will not resolve the wondering why. They will not make the waiting end, but they will move you slightly more toward the full engagement with the life you are actually in rather than the one you are waiting for. And that movement, small as it is not nothing. It is the beginning of the kind of trust that is not performed but lived, the kind that does not require the outcome to be certain in order to show up fully in the present. The kind that says this life, right now, with everything it contains and everything it is still missing, is the one I'm going to inhabit all the way. That is enough. Today, that is everything.